dismayed when I saw King Charles photographed being nice to Zelensky and extending hospitality towards him, and Zelensky arriving in his combat fatigues, which is obviously his uniform that he was told to wear by whoever his paymasters are in NATO. And I was saying that I have a soft spot for King Charles, and I think of all the royals, he is the most thoughtful. He is interested in philosophy and architecture and aesthetics, and he tries his best to take an intelligent interest in the world around him, and even gets into trouble for it, and for that I sympathise and empathise, and I do wish him well. Now, Charles being nice to Zelensky, do I think he had the choice? Wasn't he just basically told to go and greet Zelensky? Did he have a choice of staying in his royal bedroom and refusing to come out? Did he have that option? I suppose. Well, I don't know if he's met Zelensky before. I think it's his first time. And so I guess if I were him and had been reading Western media, I suppose I would feel a certain duty to go and meet Zelensky rather than stay in my royal bedroom and refusing to come out. So I could at least say I met him and thought he was a villain and a charlatan and not to be trusted, or unlikely though it is, I thought he was an honourable man and should be, doing his best for the Ukrainians. So I suppose if I had been Charles, I would have felt obliged to meet him, if only for the first time. I suppose I can Google how many times has Charles met Zelensky. That's his one and only time, isn't it? Yeah, so it's his first and only time. I guess if I were Charles, I would say, all right, I'll meet him just once, and if I think he's a villain, then I won't be going again. So I don't think it's of any significance that he was being nice to Zelensky. Maybe he didn't have a choice. Maybe, Charles was threatened into meeting Zelensky and being nice to him. Who knows? But it's neither here nor there that King Charles was being seen to be hospitable to Zelensky. It is neither here nor there. The rest of us, more informed than Prince Charles, would know exactly what to think of another European war. I suspect that Charles has his views about a European war. We don't know what it is. I hope one day, if he keeps a diary, we will eventually discover what he thought of the people he had to meet and the things he had to do, and what he thought about his royal life. So I am saying that while I empathise with King Charles, I am nevertheless a Republican. I used to be a monarchist, but I realise that cannot be. That cannot be, because it wouldn't be rational to hold on to an institution that is, in fact, an anachronism, and worse, taking up space and confusing everyone. It would be like if my boiler broke down and I knew it had to be replaced, and I just hung on to the old one and refused to allow it to be taken away and scrapped. That would be foolish indeed. Or, okay, let's say I take out my old broken boiler and put it somewhere, so it wouldn't take up space. It would take up space, wouldn't it? It was still, I'd have to find a place for it. Where would I put it? If I had a garden, would I put, I would have to address my mind and resources to storing something useless. Now, is a monarchy useless? People say, well, it has, it serves British diplomacy, it serves British tourism, etc. And I'm saying, no. It's an important institution. If it's useful, by all means keep it. But if it's just confusing everyone and letting the British government get away with all kinds of things and pull the wool over the eyes of so many people within the British Empire, which still exists, but in a disguised, camouflaged form. Britain didn't lose all of its empire. It lost India and the non-white parts, but Canada and Australia are still British, and Canada and Australia serve the geopolitical interests of the Americans. Now, do we want to serve the geopolitical interests of the Americans? I would say it depends. It depends if America is our ally and what it's trying to do. And before Trump was elected for a second or third time, American foreign policy was conducted in under the guidance or dominance of the neocons. And after Trump came into office, he decided to play things a different way. And obviously the war in Ukraine was American-inspired. It's only in Europe because European leaders unquestioningly follow the orders of Washington. And from their confusion that they have no idea how to govern themselves. And that is why they go begging to Washington, asking Trump to change his mind about ending the war in Ukraine. He's just saying, well, why don't you just pretend that you weren't elected and we can just carry on as before in the way that Biden wanted? I mean, do you see how pathetic and infantile this whole exercise is? And to our horror, in Europe, we see European leaders exhibiting signs of catatonia, of dementia, of just the inability to observe events, understand them, and act accordingly. So Europeans are in a bit of trouble because I suppose it is a problem of being a vassal state. You're a vassal state, you just do everything that you're told to do by Washington or whoever is your overlord, and then the overlord says, goodbye, you're not paying enough to pay for your keep, for your defense against the Russians. And in any case, we want to be friendly with the Russians now, and these Europeans have no idea what to do. And Britain, being the country with the most prestigious monarchy, has got the idea that if Charles is nice to Zelensky, he might he might get he might save face after um, being humiliated by the Trump administration in the White House. So that's how things are at the moment. I don't want people to think that I have a hatred for the British royal family. Obviously they occupy a place of affection amongst many members of the Commonwealth. Many of us watched The Crown and enjoyed ourselves very much. But the point is, sometimes we just have to let go of things that no longer have a place in our homes, because we either don't have the storage space or it is actually harmful. Now, I'm afraid the monarchy is tied up with the institution of the church, and the church is yet another thing that is muddying the waters, and people are transfixed by this whole idea of clinging on to their tradition because it is their identity, and they're not being rational about it. I know Australians and Canadians who instinctively cling to the British monarchy because they want something old to cling to because of their relatively new identities as Canada, Australia, etc. Now, they needn't worry about that because, we all have our identity. It's just that most of the time we don't like our identity. We don't like being, male or female or tall or short or old or young or whatever. There's something about our identity that we don't like. But when we construct an identity for ourselves that is truthful and attractive, then we are on our way to good mental health. And this is basically what I propose to do. So obviously this is all to do with religion, in that monarchy is linked to Christianity because Christianity supports the divine right of kings. Nobody talks about it now because we have long since left the age of absolute monarchy. We are not Tudors, terrified of having our death warrant signed and being burnt at the stake as Tudor kings, Tudor monarchs were tended to do. But when did Britain become a constitutional monarchy? Now, that's an interesting question. I don't actually know the answer to that. Grok will know. When did Britain become a constitutional monarchy? Britain became a constitutional monarchy gradually over time, but a key milestone is often traced to the Glorious Revolution of 1688 to 89. Right. Okay, that was when the Protestant succession was secured. Okay. So what this means is that over the centuries, the absolute power of the monarch to sign your death warrant and accuse you of blasphemy and have you burnt at the stake gradually diminished, declined, until we are now at the stage where the monarch doesn't even get to enjoy his right to freedom of worship and freedom of expression. So what is the point then? What is the point? George has shown up. He asked me why I support the monarchy. No, I am not a monarchist. I was a monarchist. I am now a Republican. I am expressing my sympathy for Charles. I just happen to like him, all right. Am I allowed to like Charles? I kind of like the story of him marrying the wrong woman, eventually marrying the woman he wanted to marry, which was Camilla. There's just something about Charles that I like, all right. And I also want monarchists to understand that, I'm not some kind of royal hating, class envying leftist. I certainly wouldn't want to give that impression to anyone. I even have a job for Charles if he wishes to abdicate. So he would have the job of being his own Archbishop of Canterbury, if that's what he'd like to do, because after all, the British monarch is his own Pope, and therefore his own Bishop, Archbishop of Canterbury. So if he's out of the job of being monarch, then the most natural job, should he want it, is to be his own Archbishop of Canterbury. But whether Charles feels able to anoint his son for the coronation, if the institution of monarchy totters on, is another thing. So my proposal does raise a few questions. Probably he won't be. To manage his application, he might say, "I believe that the true religion of God is, in fact, Islam. So I'm off to become Muslim." And obviously, he can't be his own Archbishop of Canterbury anymore. So it would depend on how Charles wants to manage his own application, if it comes to that. George says, "I know you love power and posturing and the Islam simping." No. If I were the sort of snob that you want to portray me as, then I wouldn't be bumping along at the bottom with you. I would just be, one of the people pissing on you, pretending not to know what the hell you're on about, and pretending you're all, Nazis and whatever. But I'm not. I'm bumping along at the bottom with you lot. So, of course, I'm going to say that I understand the role of hierarchy in solving problems. Because basically, if somebody is oppressing you, you appeal to the person above your oppressor to tell your oppressor to cease and desist, right? This is how this moral and political system works. And I'm talking about the political system of patriarchy, which has hierarchy. And I'm saying it's necessary. I know people hate it. People just want to think that everybody's equal. I'm afraid not. You can't be equal, because if you were all equal, then nobody would be able to agree on who is to do what. I mean, you can't have an egalitarian army, can you? Because, well, nobody would attack that fort if the general said, "We have to attack that fort," because his infantry would say, "Well, you do it. We don't fancy risking our lives. Why don't you do it to show us how it's done?" So, back to the question of Zelensky. I'm basically saying Charles probably had his arm twisted and had to do it, had to be nice to Zelensky, or he thought, as I might in his position, that I haven't met Zelensky before. Why don't I see what kind of a man he is? But whatever the reason of the British monarch, the rest of us and the rest of the world knows that it is very dangerous for Europeans to continue with this European war, because, you shouldn't shit on your own doorstep. And it would be in the interests of Western Europe to enjoy cheap energy supplied by a friendly Russia. Sadly for these European leaders, they've been put up to being mean to the Russians after many years of Cold War propaganda. But I think, because I am this optimist, that we just have to say sorry. Sorry, Russians, for being mean to you. We were just being stupid, believing in all that Cold War propaganda. We won't be stupid anymore. Can we be friends and enjoy your cheap energy, please? Something like that. Because really, we are what they call it, inflection point, paradigm shift, end of an era, this sort of idea. So we have to prepare ourselves. Obviously, our leaders are in denial. They're burying their heads in the sand, and they can't accept that the neocons in Washington are no longer in control, and Trump will be kicking them all out. And our leaders have not read the memo, or they're too stupid and crazy to understand the message. But we have to look at the world with cold, dispassionate eyes and accept what we cannot change, which is that liberalism is about to reach its final destination, and if it doesn't stop, if the train doesn't stop, it will hit the buffers. Now, there are videos already, YouTube videos, talking about the end of liberalism. And I predict there will be more and more and more of them. And this means that the question of what is to replace liberalism, the question of what is to replace liberalism will arise. And I'm saying, of course, it's going to be secular Quranism, because it would be a way of showing penitence for the idolatry and blasphemy of Christianity, and also penitence for the sexual liberation and feminism allowed by liberalism, and also it is workable. So basically, we still have this institution of the European Union with its, European Court of Justice and its Parliament and its I've forgotten what they are now. So we have EU institutions. Okay, so we have the Council of the European Union, the European Council, Court of Justice, European Court of Auditors. So, obviously it's to do with law and budgets and the passing of laws and the judging of laws, European Central Bank, European Parliament. So these institutions would have would be useful. Obviously, it's useful. I'm not going to say, completely get rid of the whole thing. It's unpopular because the laws that come from it are unpopular, but there's no reason why these laws should continue to be unpopular if secular Quranism is adopted by Western countries, because that would mean an Islamic European Union with its institutions adopting and implementing European directives that conform to the principles of the Quran. And this is how I see Europe going forward. And I hope that the way forward will be stable and peaceful and progressive and rational, giving good government to Europeans. Europeans, they probably do need the European Union because they are, well, plenty of European countries. They don't speak the same language. They all have, different religions, and we don't want Europe to become embroiled in European wars again, do we? I don't think we do. So it is very important for Europeans to manage the situation in a way that avoids all kinds of unnecessary arguments, and we want really the transition from liberalism to Quranic principles of governance to be smooth and orderly. And I really believe that it can be done. What is required is courageous, honourable, influential people prepared to discuss ideas rather than to fear the wrath of the unreasonable. And that's all I want to say on the subject. Thank you for listening.